Growing up, I was a bit of a tomboy. I would always be playing with my BMX bike or on my skateboard or playing cricket or football with my brothers. And I was never really into dolls. So it'd be fair to say I had never actually owned a Barbie doll. And decades later, when Barbie was being sort of shamed for being a bad role model for girls, I happily went along with that story. Until when I was researching for my latest book, I came across the backstory to Barbie. And the story goes that in the 1950s, Ruth Handler she was the wife of the co-founder of Mattel that made Barbie. And what she noticed that when her two children, Ken and Barbara, and yes, Ken and Barbie were named after her children, what she noticed that when they were playing with their respective dolls, they were pretending to be adults. And all Barbara could do was imagine herself as a caregiver, where Ken was encouraged to think of himself as an astronaut or a firefighter or a scientist. So Ruth pitched the idea of producing a 3D plastic doll with fabric clothing. Now initially she didn't get a lot of support for it, but she persisted, and in 1959 Barbie debuted on the New York Toy Fair. And as they say in the classics, the rest is history. But there's a great quote from Ruth Handler, and she says, "My whole philosophy with Barbie was the little girl could be anything she wanted to be. Barbie always represented the fact that women have choices." On hearing that story, it completely changed my perception of the brand of Barbie. And not only changed my perception, but will actually change my future buying habits. I've got two daughters and I never bought them a Barbie, but maybe any future grandkids might just receive a Barbie. Now, when I heard that story, it was such a great story, but also a missed opportunity because I had to really search for it, where I thought, wouldn't this be great if that story was on front and center of their website, was on the packaging of every Barbie product, because that story could change perceptions. So what is brand and what is brand storytelling? Let's start with brand. If you look for a definition of brand, you'll get lots of various ones. One of my favourite comes from Jeff Bezos, and he said that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. My take on that, it's the stories people share about you when you're not in the room. We all have a brand, all of us have a brand, whether we know it or not. And your brand will determine if people work for you, if they employ you, if they invest in you, if they support you, if they buy from you. Now, when the stakes are that high, you'd want to take control of it. And just as individuals all have a brand, companies all have a brand. Using stories to communicate your brand is often referred to as brand storytelling. Now, when defining what something is, it's often good to define what it's not. So what brand storytelling isn't, it's not just a logo, it's not just a tagline, it's not just a slick corporate video, and it's definitely not just one story. In my latest book, Magnetic Stories, Connect with Customers and Engage Employees with Brand Storytelling, I talk about the 5-step framework to implement brand storytelling. And brand storytelling can be implemented at an individual level, a team level, or across the entire organisation, regardless of size, regardless of industry, from startups to small to medium enterprises to multinationals. The first step is to define your brand. What is it you want to be known for? Here I'm talking about what's your purpose, what's your values, what are people saying about you, about the culture of your company? When it comes to brand storytelling, there are 5 types of stories companies should consider sharing. The first is the creation story. This is either how the company started or how the product started. But you need to focus on why as opposed to the how and when. Because when we focus on the how and when, it ends up becoming a timeline. And a timeline is not a story. The second type are culture stories. These are stories about employees living the brand, living your values, being really conscious of capturing your employees doing the right thing. Culture stories is also about how your leaders share personal stories to bring the values to life, because you cannot bring values to life with bullet points. You need your leaders sharing personal stories to bring them to life.